Our last patient of the day had come in for a crown. Super easy, standard. We see someone almost every day for a crown appointment. Myself and the other nurse I work with split these long appointments between each other, as we both assist the only dentist we have working at the moment. It was my turn for this crown, which was great because the 3-hour appointments make the afternoons fly by. Some quick information on how a crown appointment works. First, we strip away the old fillings, decayed enamel and cracks, leaving behind only healthy enamel and dentine. Once we've removed all the bad parts, we have to create a margin around the tooth for the crown to sit on, leaving behind a seamless join after the crown is cemented on. Sometimes the cracks or decay can go subgingival, which means we need to create the margin under the gum line. When this happens, the dentist usually just has to pack some cord in between the tooth and gingiva just to push the gum away so that we can see the margins. The dentist, now I call him Paul, was in the process of cord packing on our patient, now I call him Dean, because the main crack in Dean's tooth that had been causing him pain extended quite close to the lingual gum line, the tongue side of the tooth, so we had to push the margin a little bit further under that. Paul had asked me for a length of size 1 cord, which is a dark blue colour. Usually while we are cord packing, Paul will just tell stories about his childhood, nor about teaching, or about something that had happened to him that day, just to fill the silence while no noisy tools are being used. This time, he was telling us about his drive into work that morning, where he watched a young driver speed past him, only to be immediately chased by a police car. Dean was open-mouthed chuckling along. I was quietly giggling to myself, when Paul stopped dead, put the cord packer down, and quickly asked me for the camera. As his hand stretched out to grab the camera from its bracket, I turned to the plastic-covered mouse on the bench behind me to actually take the photos in the program. The camera sprang to life, showing us the bracket that Paul was pointing at, while he turned the overhead light off so that the photo didn't turn out too bright. He pointed it toward the tooth we were working on, the old filling stripped away, the amalgam stain left behind in the healthy dentine, the mostly exposed margin, and the blue cord half poking out from the gum steel. I could see where the cord had already been packed, leaving a blue line around about half of the tooth under the gum, but I could also see something else where the margin went the deepest. It couldn't have been the cord. This something else was a darker brown colour, not blue. My first thought was it was either a bit of food caught under the gum, or a very old piece of calculus, which has been left there for so long it has gone from the yellowish colour it normally is, to a dark shade of brown. That is pretty typical for subgingival calculus. I took 3 photos of the tooth, at varying angles, as Paul moved the camera around, and waited for him to ask me to grab an ultrasonic scaler so we could clean out whatever was stuck there. As I looked at Paul, waiting for him to turn to me, I watched his eyebrows shoot up and his eyes go wide behind his loops. I turned my attention back to the screen, where the camera was still pointing, just in time to see a slight movement. It almost looked like a close-up of the cord being tugged on under the gum, but again, it wasn't the blue line that moved. It was the dark brown something. I whipped my head back towards Paul. He was already putting the camera back in its cradle and picking up the Periodontal Probe, which is used to check the health of a patient's gingiva by pushing it into the gums. I watched Dean's forehead screw up, just above the sunglasses he was wearing, as Paul pushed the probe into the little perio pocket where the brown thing was. I leaned my head as far over Dean as I could, trying to get a better look now that the camera view was taken away from me. I watched Paul sink the probe in beside the tooth, get caught on something, and then pull the probe back out and try again. After a couple of goes at it, I could tell that the local anaesthetic was starting to wear off, and Dean was starting to feel what was happening. Paul turned the probe over, using the sickle side to pull the cord back out of the way, putting the now blood-soaked blue piece of string into a tissue I was holding. Paul switched that tool out for the hand scaler, the strongest and sharpest of the tools currently on the tray. After putting the tissue in the bin, I leaned back over. I watched Dean's face screw up again as Paul plunged the tip of the hand scaler back into the spot, going for a real dig. When the brown thing moved. Not just any kind of movement, not just being bumped by the scaler. This thing ran away. It zoomed off to the other side of the lingual area of the gum, coming to a stop once it was out of reach of the hand scaler. Paul was stunned for a moment. Then he shook it off and went for it again, really digging this time to try and get to it. Dean gasped, a look of panic on his half-covered-up face as he looked up into the shock in Paul's eyes. Paul struck gold then, victory taking over the look of shock as he tugged on the scaler. It looked like he had caught the brown spot between the hook of the scaler and the other tooth, so this time it couldn't flee. He tugged again, and I could see the effort strain in his forearm. He tugged once more, putting more effort into it, and it budged slightly. Determined now, Paul tugged again and again, twice in quick succession, the scaler almost coming out, pulling the spot up to the light of the day with it. With one last tug, the scaler came free, and with it came a small brown spider. It was bigger than it looked once it came out from the gum. Its legs uncurled now that it had space, and it ended up being about the same size of my pinky nail. Seeing that spider sitting on Dean's tooth was enough to make me almost throw up in my mask. A live spider that was tugged in someone's gum for who knows how long. Paul reached for the tweezers on the tray when I saw another brown spot appear, almost like it was coming from the deep. Dean gasped again, a mix of fear and pain, and I watched another set of spider legs poke out from the pocket Paul had just pulled the first spider from. Dean tried to say something, tried to yell at us, still with his mouth half proper open. It sounded like something is moving in me, all garbled around Paul's fingers. The second spider pulled itself free as a third, fourth, and fifth brown spot appeared. I screamed, snapping Paul's attention back to Dean's tooth. He dropped the mirror at the same time I jumped out of my chair, tripped on the wheel of Paul's chair, and dropped to the floor like a sack of potatoes. I could hear Paul calling for the other nurse as my head contacted the hard floor with a sickening thud. Then everything went dark. When I woke, I was sitting in my car, my bag on the seat next to me, and the keys in the ignition. The sky was getting dark at this point. I had no idea how long I had been sitting there, or how long after I passed out they must have put me here. I decided to try the front door of the clinic, but it was locked, and the lights were off. I haven't tried to contact Paul or the other nurse yet, but a part of me never wants to go back in there ever again. I still don't know what happened to our patient after that.
Hello listeners, if you enjoyed this story, please check out the author in the description. For more content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more sinister readings.